This presentation will give you an introduction to the dependency theory, as well as outlining its strengths and weaknesses and a couple case studies. Before we begin to examine the dependency theory, let's look at a bit of its history. This theory was developed by a UN director named Raoul Prebisch in the late 1950s. He and his colleagues were concerned with disparities in development that they observed across the globe. Two definitions that will be repeated throughout this presentation are the following: peripheral nations and core nations. Peripheral nations are countries that are less developed than core countries and receive an unequal distribution of the world's wealth. Core countries, on the other hand, are more industrialized nations who receive the majority of the world's wealth. Now, what is the basic idea of the dependency theory? Dependency theorists think that the development of some nations are stagnant because of the exploitative nature of the previously mentioned core nations. Less developed periphery countries are said to primarily serve the interests of the wealthier countries and end up having little to no resources to put towards their own development. The theory points out that the economies of periphery countries rely on manual labor and the export of raw materials to core nations. The core countries then process these raw materials and sell them at a much higher price. Some of these manufactured goods go right back to the periphery countries from which the raw materials came, and periphery nations end up spending more money on the processed goods than they get for their raw materials. Underdeveloped nations, because of their small economies, may also rely on core nations for medical and nutritional aid. The dependency theory describes a vicious cycle that enforces a hierarchy of nations across the globe. The country of Haiti is a good example of how the dependency theory plays out in the real world. Haiti belonged to France from 1660 until its independence in 1804. During its colonization, 60% of Europe's coffee and 40% of its sugar came from Haiti. However, most Haitians did not receive the profits from this massive exportation and remained impoverished and enslaved. Just recently, in the 2011 Haitian earthquake, Haiti's infrastructure was crippled and the country is still recovering. The United States, on the other hand, was praised for their quick response to the disaster and gained international approval. Haiti remains dependent on foreign aid, much of it from the United States, and is at a relatively low level of development, with a Human Development Index value of 0.454. No theory is foolproof. If it was, it would no longer be a theory. As it is, the dependency theory has a few strengths and weaknesses. One strength of the theory is that it is easy to understand. It also examines the interrelationships of nations across the world, and is not limited to explaining individual countries without an idea of the world as a whole. The theory can also be applied to a national rather than international scale, and can explain the economic disparities between regions of the same country, such as comparisons between rural and urban areas. There are also, however, some weaknesses to be considered. First of all, the theory can be seen to actually promote the dominance of core nations by portraying periphery countries as hopeless cases that will always remain undeveloped. In this way, the dependency theory is made for the continued advancement of core nations. Another weakness is that the theory focuses mainly on economic development, on the effects of capitalism on economic growth, instead of taking into account different areas of development. A country may have excellent public services such as education and healthcare without its citizens having large salaries. A final flaw of the dependency theory is that it is cynical and does not come supported with overwhelming evidence. Looking at case studies from around the world, development is not a stagnant entity. From 1980 to 2011, South Korea's Human Development Index soared from an index of 0.634 to 0.897. Tunisia, meanwhile, rocketed up the charts from an HDI of 0.45 to one of 0.698. While it is true that most developed Western nations have remained at high stages of development over the past 50 years or so, the so-called periphery nations of yesterday have generally shown upward trends in their development. The dependency theory is too simple. It does not look at all the factors at play, and fails to look beyond the black and white. Thank you for watching this overview of the dependency theory. We hope you found it both informative and interesting.